Pittsburgh Steeler fans, welcome back to another episode of the Scho Bro Show. This is the Behind the Steel Curtain co-editor, Dave Schofield. I don't know, you might notice I'm kind of sounding a little bit different. At times I'm a little bit loud and normal, and at times I'm just not. I'm kind of back and forth right now, constantly with my emotions, but that's kind of how we are right now with Steeler fans, especially coming with me, as always, each and every week, is my big brother, Rich. Rich, how you feeling? So you're definitely not breathing in. There it comes. For those of you not watching on YouTube, he's waving. He's waving the towel towards the microphone.
Still working on getting the stench out of the house from the other night.
Yes, you just got you got to get the stank out. There was plenty of stank. The reason I'm kind of up, not really up, but I'm down, but then I'm not so down because then I realize I am down. There's an awful lot of emotions. We're going to be talking about emotions tonight because it's been an emotional roller coaster for Steelers Nation here recently. There's, I don't know about you. Are we going through the different stages of grief right now that started at about, the game kicked off at 8:15. So it started about 8:16 on Sunday night.
Jeez Louise, I was like less than 5 minutes in the game. I'm down in Iron City. It's like, here's yoo-hoos.
Yeah. I looked down at my screen for just a second and the ball's on the ground. And I'm like, what did I just miss? I'm like, everything was falling apart. But I got to come back to the title of the show because we're going to get to it. Because obviously we're going to talk about this game, but we're going to talk more than just about the game. We're going to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers in general. But what we want to remember, both with the game, with even looking at the last 6 games of the season, remember, we also had the first 11. That despite the title of the podcast tonight is Despite the Disappointment, we still love our Steelers. And I got to thinking about this. And some people are like, I don't love them. I don't know. You know what? Yeah, you do. And if you don't, I don't know what you're doing. Because
no, you love them. That's why it hurts so
much.
Why
it hurts so bad. That's why it hurts so bad. I mean, I'm sure Brian Anthony Davis could come in and enlighten us with a bunch of 2 a.m. stories. When you say goodbye to the 2 a.m. girl, you know what? Do you feel terrible? Does it rip you up inside? No, because you're not emotionally invested. It's not the 2 a.m. story. It's the long-term thing that when it finishes, it just rips your heart out. And I'm going to talk about a few of those things. I'm going to, and I'll get to them eventually. But the reason I thought of the title of this show tonight was I was exhausted. I mean, the post-game show went from, I'm going to ballpark it, like 11:30 p.m. to 12:30 a.m. Eastern. Or was it around there? Or was it 11:45?
Oh, it was almost midnight. It was about 10 minutes of midnight when you guys started.
I know. We actually fired up the show and we're like, you know what? We're just not going to wait for Tomlin's press conference. It's taking too long. And right before we hit start, boom, he started it. We're like, all right, we'll listen to it real quick first in case we need to drop anything out there.
Yeah, you waited long. You thought that's why I was texting. Are we going to do the show?
Yeah, because we were just
Thomas press conference. It's like, really? That's still going on? I clicked over it. It's like, oh yeah, there he is.
Yeah. Yep. So. And that's what it was. But I was exhausted. I still needed to do my numbers article. And the problem is,
okay, so hold on. Comparison. What time did you go to bed?
3.
Okay, you beat me.
3 a.m. And it's funny because does my article normally take that long?
Hold on.
No.
Hold on.
Okay, go ahead.
You went to bed at 3.
Yes.
What time did you get up? What time did you get up?
My wife allowed me to sleep in Monday morning. I got up at 9 a.m.
Okay, I went to bed at 2:30. I was up at 7.
And you know what?
Now here's the bigger and one last big question on that.
Okay,
did you sleep?
It still took me. I was drained. I was dead. My eyes, I was struggling to keep them open. And yet when I went to bed, it still took me probably between 20 and 30 minutes to actually fall asleep. And honestly, I didn't sleep well. I kept waking up because I was dreaming about the game that it didn't really actually happen that way. You know?
No, see, for me, I didn't sleep well, and it wasn't even so much thinking about the game. It was more thinking about, yeah, I got no more Steeler games to watch.
Yeah, well, and we'll get to that. But I still want to tell you when I came up with the title of this subject, this podcast, because yes, my wife allowed me to sleep until 9 a.m. And when I got up, I did not feel like cooking breakfast. And it's funny because people are like, "Oh, well, why didn't your wife just cook breakfast?" And you being my brother, you know how funny that comment really is.
Yeah, that's pretty.
Because I do all the cooking. I tell you what, though, my wife does make first class, world best snickerdoodles. She bakes, she decorates cakes. She just doesn't cook. So I do all the cooking. I didn't want snickerdoodles for breakfast.
She's a baker, not a chef. You're the chef.
Exactly. And I didn't feel it. And she knew that I wouldn't feel like it and everything else. And as soon as I got up, she was with the kids. She's like, go ahead up the street to the closest eating establishment to our house a few miles up the road. No, that's right. I forgot that new Sheets was put in there. I went just past the Sheets.
That's correct.
Very New Englandy. It is the Dunkin' Donuts. So I went for Dunkin' Donuts, and I went to leave for Dunkin' Donuts. And do you know what I did, though, before I left?
Hopefully I took a shower.
Oh, nah. Forget that. I had to go get the donuts. Dude, you want to know the truth? This is terrible. I'm going to confession to everyone out there in BTSC podcast. I went to leave. I'm like, I went so fast. I'm like, I didn't brush my teeth. I'm like, I'm wearing a mask. It doesn't matter. I came home and brushed my teeth.
Nice.
So I'm like, I just wanted to make sure the kids had something to eat. But you know what I did? I put on my Pittsburgh Steelers shorts. I put on my Pittsburgh Steelers shirt. I put on my black and gold shoes. Mainly because I don't have any other color shoes other than black and gold unless they're dress shoes. I put on my Steelers coat because I only have Steelers coats. I put on my Steelers hat because I only have Steelers hats and I'm bald and I'm not gonna not wear a hat. And I put on my Steelers mask because even though that was an embarrassing, frustrating game, I am no less of a fan the next morning. And I put them all on, and I went to Dunkin' Donuts, knowing that the guy that delivers my coffees to me is a big Ravens fan that has a Ravens mask because, the Dunkin' Donuts is right next to my son's preschool. So a lot of times I'll stop in just for coffee. And we always, he's not a bad Ravens fan. He's not a guy that just doesn't know what he's talking about and just a jerk about stuff, which a lot of Ravens fans that I deal with around here are. But knowing that, could I catch scrutiny, flack, anything? And I'm going to have to answer about, what happened last night? And I didn't want to answer those questions, but I'm still no less of a Steelers fan because of what happened. So I'm extremely disappointed, but we still love our Steelers, don't you?
Yep.
Did you wear any of your Steelers gear on Monday?
Monday was a work from home day for me. So
you had it nice.
So I did not. Otherwise, yes, I would have. I'd had my Steelers mask on at work, but it was a work for home day. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I couldn't, sleep in half the day, but
I know. Well, but before we go on, I do have to mention two things for the live chat. One, if you're going to use bad language, you're not going to be here very long. Okay, just blanket warning, because that's just how it is. Two, we've got to give a pretty big shout out, don't we?
Oh, yeah, you better.
Better, because not only that, she's in the live chat.
Oh, is she? Where?
She's in, because she brought up, this is our sister Alita. It's funny because our it's technically her nephew. It's her husband's brother's son, who her husband's brother was my college roommate. So I'm kind of like an honorary uncle to him as well. He came over for my wife's cookies and he called them snickerdoodles, and it was pretty adorable. That's why she put it out there. But we got to give the shout out to our sister because today's her birthday.
She's old.
She's older
not as old as me.
She's not as old as you though, but she's older than me. This is the couple months out of the year where she'll be 2 years older than me until April when I catch back up. So Sis Alita, or as our kids call her, Aunt Freddie. We're not even going to go into that story. Happy birthday. We're not going to throw the number out there, but we got to put it out there since this is family here. So, Rich, so you didn't have to, go around. I still have people asking me questions today. What happened to the Steelers and everything else? It was one of those times where it went so bad so fast that even those people that despise the Steelers kind of still even felt bad for
yeah,
Steelers
it was
fans.
like it all happened so fast. So I was just like, what like it was over, like that was worse and faster in a deep dark hole than when we went to Pittsburgh and saw them do the same thing against the Jags.
Yeah.
January 2018.
Yeah, I know. It was bad. It was, and it was one of those things of, and our sister calls us dorks.
Yeah,
of course. That's what she does. Yeah, it was just one of those games. I've been to those games. And the thing is, I've seen the Steelers fight their way back in those games. And they did fight their way back.
Now I will ask you a question.
Okay.
Okay, so the first play of the game happened, and the snap goes over Ben's head, and it's recovered for a touchdown. What was your initial thought and reaction?
We just gave away any kind of momentum that we could have tried to gain.
Oh, no. First thing I thought was, that's okay. We still win this.
No. Well, I thought
why?
We gave away momentum, and then I said, you know what? I guess we're going to spot them 7 points and have to overcome it.
Don't you remember? I think it was like not the first snap of the game. I think it was like the third when we were watching them play the Rams last year, and the ball goes flying over Mason and returned for the touchdown. And that was the only points they gave up the whole game.
I put that on Twitter. Well, the only touchdown. Yeah, you're right. The only touchdown they gave up because they gave up a field goal and a safety, right? Because it was 12 points.
Yeah, and the safety, I think we just stepped out of the end. Yeah, it was one of those.
It was at the far end from us. I do remember that. But yeah, that wasn't the first snap of the game, but it was the first drive. It was within 15. It might have been the second play, but that was crazy. And they had to pick it up and run it back. And that was just. But you know what? The difference also there, the defense countered with the score. The Steelers defense scored one back against the Rams. Yeah. That was the fumble that Minkah Fitzpatrick ran back, and you and I turned to each other. We're like, I don't feel like I could celebrate. I have a feeling that was coming back because we couldn't tell how close it was from the stands. We're like, they're not going to put it on the board because of everything else. And next thing you know, they kicked the extra point, and we're just like, I guess it was good. So that's sometimes. You don't understand. Instant replay sometimes completely can kill the vibe in the stadium because something happens. You're like, can I celebrate this touchdown or do I have to wait for them to tell me it's actually a touchdown? So I'd still rather them get the call right, but it does kind of kill the vibe. But there wasn't anyone in the stadium this year, so why did it matter? But I tweeted about that. I said, you know what? This sounds like the Rams game. They came back and won that one. And then we had the interception.
And then Ben throws the interception on the next drive. Kyle runs downstairs and he said, I didn't have on one of my pairs of lucky socks. He's got a couple pairs of lucky socks. So he comes down, he puts them on, and he comes back up just in time to watch Cleveland score the touchdown. I said, they didn't work. He said, no, all that was happening before I really got the socks on, got up here. We'll be okay.
Yeah.
Steelers go 3 and out, punt. Right?
Are you talking the third drive by now? Because the first one was over the head, then it was the interception. I'm trying to remember. I want to actually bring the actual drives up because
we went fumble for the touchdown, interception, 3 and out, interception. Was it that? Was it?
It was something crazy of those because I actually have the drives right here. That I can, let's just go ahead and say what it was. Okay, so it was fumble, interception, 3 and out, and that was when they punted on 4th and 1, but where they were at their own 35, give up another touchdown, interception, and then another punt. But that punt was that of a drive. The punt happened in the second quarter, but the drive started in the first quarter.
Yeah.
And what really bothered me about that punt, there was two punts that bothered me. I'm sorry, but when you're down 28-0, even in the second quarter, if you cross midfield and you were not in field goal range, you were in 4-down territory.
Yes, you are.
There is, I mean, you're talking about if you punt that and it's a touchback, you're talking 19 yards. Go for it, even if it's 4th and 9.
What is there to lose?
Yeah.
You're down 21-0.
Yeah.
28-0. Whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, yes, that one kills me.
Yes.
But anyway, they scored to go up 21. Okay, to nothing. Kyle's like, I'm going to bed. So he gets up, leaves, wanders around, then he comes back. He's like, no, maybe I'll stay. Ben throws the next pick. Kyle's like, I'm done.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I saw it in your knee-jerk reaction article.
Yep. He was like, that's it. And that was it. He went to bed. And he came up the next morning, and he and I sat and talked about the game and processed it. Yeah, he was just – he was like, nope, I'm not staying up late and stressing out over this. They're killing me.
Yep. Hey,
it's okay. I said I'd have been going to bed too, except for the fact I had to write the article.
You could have messaged me and said, "Finish my stupid article."
No,
I gotta go to bed. No.
I wasn't going to do
if
that.
It was going to be your last one, you wanted to see it to the end.
Doing them. I was doing it. So
sorry, your last one of the 2020 season. We're going to leave it at that.
We'll see.
That's a discussion for it was your last one of the 2020 season. So real quick before I lose it, because I don't want it to get lost in other comments, we do have $5 super chat from Steel Dog 88. He brought up something that we'll kind of mention this a little bit later. He says, I'm over this season already, on to the next. You know when we're going on to the next? It's called the commercial break. That's when we'll do that. And he says, hate to jump ahead. Will we go center or running back in the first round of the draft?
We'll come back to you there, Steel Dog. But our show is always the first half looking back, the second half looking forward.
And then until next week, then all we have is forward. You know, all we have. I mean, there's always some looking back. There you go. Our sister chimes in. Her oldest son Warren, he stayed up expecting a miracle. And you know what? They came pretty darn close. That's the thing that bothers me. There's so many things you can say. Seriously, Tomlinisms, things of those sorts where you can say all these other things or all these Pittsburgh Steelers success you can have. But recently, you can add the phrase, except in the postseason. You know, the Steelers are the gold standard of sacking the quarterback, except in the postseason.
Except in the postseason.
We do not live in our fears, except in the postseason.
Yes.
The standard is the standard, except in the postseason. You know, that's seriously. I mean, live chat, I don't know if I'll catch any of them or not, but if you have any more that you want to throw in a line and say, except in the postseason, because second straight, and it's funny, I would say second straight, you have to go back to the 2017 season to get the one before. Second straight playoff game, no sacks. Second straight playoff game, over 45 points given up. You know, this defense my prediction about this game came down to so many different things. I felt that the offense was going to need to still find their way. I did not feel that one half of good football against the Colts was enough to say, all right, we're good now. I was nervous about that.
Yep.
Honestly, it's funny because part of me is like, oh, you need to keep things going and get it together a little bit more.
More reps with things going well.
But I can't blame them at all for resting guys when you had no bye. You had no bye. You had no bye. You know what they had? No bye. You know, so
you know what they had? COVID. No bye.
Yeah, no bye. No, there was no bye for them to have this season. These guys, you could tell they were worn down. And that was part of their problem. So, getting some of these guys to not be so worn down would be nice. But if you were going to do that, you needed to hit the ground running. And the Browns were so smart to defer because they know the Steelers don't do squat in the first quarter. So you might as well not give them the ball, the extra possession in the second half to where you start off with one that to try to take advantage of that. And what happens on the first two drives? Your team captain sat out week 17 center, snaps it into the end zone for a touchdown. And your team captain sat out week 17 quarterback, throws an interception on the next drive. I mean, right there, Felicia, excuses are for the unprepared, except for the postseason. That's a good one.
The best one, the next one's better.
Okay. The Browns, except in the postseason. Kyle, bringing it.
I'm bringing it. His game's been on here lately.
Yeah.
He must not have enough schoolwork to do. I have to,
Yeah. You got to pile that on, man. You got to pile that on.
That's right.
It's just okay. Oh, here's another good one. J.R. Bradford. We need to make routine plays routinely, except in
the postseason. Now, the next one isn't a Tomlinism, but it is kind of funny.
Yep.
Our sister, she gets it because it's her birthday. Mm-hmm. I enjoy watching Steeler football, except in the postseason.
Yeah. These are spot on. These are spot on. This is our except in the postseason podcast. Just you keep your eye on those. I'll try to do that as well. Good job. You always there for the live chat's always there for us. They're always there to help us out. But so I did my prediction for this game. I mean, it's so funny because sometimes I want to just, do a Canuck punch. I want to grab our wonderful deputy editor, Michael Beck, who does a fantastic job with our social media, and just say, Michael, stop being overconfident in the Steelers, like against the Bengals, his prediction. Whereas all he said was the Bengals stink, and he gave the score. And the Steelers lost to him.
Yep.
And he had made a comment to us about the Steelers in the postseason. I'm like, I don't, even talking about who other teams they could beat in the postseason. And I'm like, I haven't seen enough recently to believe that. It used to be, you would think the Pittsburgh Steelers were going to come out and give you their best football in the playoffs. But 2017 never got out of my brain. That I'm like, unless they do a 2017, they're not going to do a 2017. The defense is going to it's not going to be the defense doesn't show up at all again like back then. And that defense wasn't even nearly as good as this defense. Yeah. That wasn't that wasn't even a very good defense. That's not going to happen again. But they did. They completely,
not only did the offense implode with the turnovers, but the defense was not the defense we saw all year.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? Because I noticed this a lot while I was watching the game.
Uh-huh.
Did we spend way too much time in base?
At times, no.
I saw too many times. I saw plays where they ran. I think Jeffrey had it up on film somewhere. Somebody did.
Yep.
Okay, where they're going out. They got three receivers on the right side. You got a corner out very furthest. The next guy in is T.J. Watt.
We're going to talk about that play.
And the next guy in is Robert Spillane.
We're going to talk about that play because I got some stuff to say about that play. Let me know if I missed any of these. Here was one from Cree. I don't know if there's any above it or not. You'll have to let me know. He says the Steelers know how to play, except in the postseason. J.R. Bradford says, I love to brag about the Steelers, except in the postseason. So what were we doing? Never give up 30 points, except in the postseason. That was a good one. Someone did say that about Michael's article about Michael had a great article about the offseason coming up and everything. And he's really on those things, and he's more in tune with knowing what's going on with the draft than a lot of us. But sometimes I was not over. I was cautiously optimistic when it came to the Steelers. And I think we see why I was so optimistic. So you talked about that play, why we were so much in base. And you see, that was a specific play. Some of you might have seen it broken down by other people on Twitter and everything, where they were 5 wide and you had TJ Watt and Robert Spillane out on one side guarding guys. You had Vince Williams down on another guy on the other. The Steelers were in base. But you want to know what the Browns did there?
What we did,
they did what I want the Steelers to do.
Yes, that we didn't do all year. Didn't do it, not once.
Yeah,
but they did what we should have been doing with our personnel.
They beat the Steelers at their own game. Jeffrey said
not what
could have been
what should have been their game.
And in other plays, it was a lot of stuff of beating the Steelers, where the Browns offense basically employed a lot of stuff from the Steelers offense, with the added notion of being able to run the football. But when it came to the passing game, they did a lot of the stuff like the Steelers. They, on that 3rd and 2 play, that was 13 personnel. No, sorry, wrong. Said it wrong. 23 personnel. No, 22. My goodness, I'll finally get it right. They had one wide receiver, 2 tight ends. I think it was 3 tight ends and a running back, but it wasn't. I think it was 2 tight ends, a running back, and a fullback. And they split them all wide. So you're in base defense, and that's what you do. Jeffrey actually broke this play down a little bit for our Steelers Vertex, which will be out tomorrow, if I can finish it up here tonight, which actually specifically talks about the Steelers and on 3rd down. So a bunch of stuff.
I didn't want TJ Watt lined up on a tight end.
Yeah.
Okay, but why in the world wouldn't you notice what's going on and bring your corner in to guard Landry and send TJ or Spillane all the way out to guard the running back?
That's a great question that Jeffrey answers in our Steelers Vertex article for tomorrow. And not only that, it was not Spillane on Landry. It was Spillane and Minkah Fitzpatrick on Landry. Minkah was the over-the-top help.
Yeah,
but
he went to Vince's. He ended up going to Vince's side.
He actually jumped. He was actually also there to help TJ Watt, and that's what ultimately killed him. Jeffrey breaks it down pretty good in Vertex. You got to check it out tomorrow. So it was that one was. I mean, it's funny because yes, you're so frustrated what the Steelers did, but the Browns did these things that that usually the Steelers are doing to try to exploit teams. 3rd down was crazy. This is the whole notion of the article. When the Browns had 3rd, they didn't have a 3rd and 7. They had some 3rd and 6s, but then everything else was 3rd and 8 and longer. When it was 3rd and 8 and longer, they only had one play where they actually gained yards, and none of them were for a 1st down. It's because the Steelers got into 3rd and short, and the Browns came in with a run-heavy package and then threw the ball and made the Steelers pay. That's what they did, which is what the Steelers would ultimately have liked to have done at times, but they didn't. Steel Dog throws in another $5 and says, do you think it's time to go with a mobile quarterback to keep up with Baker and Jackson as it's a trend? Whoop-de-doo about Baker and Jackson, and whoop-de-doo about it being a trend. You don't need a mobile quarterback. You don't need a running quarterback. You need a quality quarterback. And regardless of style, to think that right now the Pittsburgh Steelers need to have the best possible quarterback they can for 2021, whether that's Ben Roethlisberger, whether that's Mason Rudolph, whether that's someone who's not on their team right now. But you can't say you need to have this kind of quarterback. You look at those kinds of backups in order to not have to change your system to match what you have for a starter. But just because it's a trend doesn't mean that that's going to be what you have to do. Having to follow trends that's when you end up like the old Cleveland Browns and the current Cincinnati Bengals, when you try to do things like everybody else, when you don't have the people to do it that way. So, but I still think the Bengals are a team on the rise, unfortunately. So that's just kind of our thing. You need, someone said quality QB in there, I think it said. So, what are your thoughts on that, Rich?
Yeah, you don't go and say, oh, we got to look to get this kind of quarterback. You got to look and say, whatever we get, they got to be good.
And honestly, do you really think Randy Land is the offensive coordinator to have for a mobile quarterback?
I don't think Randy Land's the coordinator to have for any quarterback, but that's just my opinion.
No. Ben Roethlisberger 5 years ago, maybe. A 5 years younger Ben Roethlisberger, maybe, but that's about it. And we'll leave it at that. But honestly, if you're not going to change, it's kind of like,
look,
you don't bring in a West Coast offense coordinator and try to run heavy packages with your offense. That's just not what you do. You need that. It's not just about the quarterback too. It's about your whole philosophy. So yeah.
Here you go though. Well, you know what? We're going to be swapping over soon. I got to get to my Randy Fichtner rant for the week.
Go for it.
Jeff said it in the post-game podcast, and it was funny because I said it during the game. So, the first time Steelers get to a third one, all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, we actually put Derek Watt in the game. Holy cow. Oh my gosh, we handed him the ball for the first time all season, and he got a first down.
The Browns are great. What did they just do? They did something new. Yeah. This can't happen.
So what happens the next time we get to that situation? We line up in the same formation. I thought, all right, now you fake it to him and you spin, you hand it off elsewhere, you do misdirection. I'm like, oh no, this is Randy Land. We'll run it right back up the same play. It'll get stuffed for a loss.
Yeah.
Guess what?
Mm-hmm.
We ran the same exact play. It got stuffed for a loss.
Well, and it also didn't help that Marquise Pouncey got blown up on that play.
I know, but it's like,
they finally did something new, and they're like, we did something new. Let's do it over and over again.
Try it again.
We're both.
Sorry,
we're both frustrated tonight. So
I could go on and make lots of jokes back on Randy Fichtner and the whole ridiculousness of him and the fart in the skillet comment and things like that. But you know what? I'd rather not.
Yeah, we're just.
Hey, you know what? I will say this. I'm going to plug some other things on we're on the website today.
Go for it.
Jeffrey's film breakdown of
James Pierre.
James Pierre. I kept wanting to say Justin Pierre, but I knew it wasn't Justin.
Is it James?
James.
I think
yes, it is. James Pierre. Great job. I agreed on the one time they threw, the only time they threw at him all game or all year, anybody, in the few snaps that he had. When that play happened, I said, whoa. First I was like, who was that? Because I'm not used to seeing his number out there.
Except on special teams.
And then they said the name. I was like, well, daggone, did he ever, play well for that double move? The out, because it was an out and up, and he just, the quick turn, like he got his hips through it so quick and just up the field. And I was just like, man, we need some more of that.
Yeah. And remember, undrafted rookie. I talked about him today in my article about looking at the rookies and really, really good rookie class this year. If you think about it, if you hit on 3 draft picks in a draft, especially not having a first round pick, that's a big deal. That's a good job. And then to find a guy in a year like Pierre that there was no training camp or anything like that, and he earns the spot and plays, and is active for all 16 games.
Yeah.
Kudos to him and kudos for finding him,
Steelers.
So that's anything else you want to plug before I give my final thoughts and we move to part 2?
Anything else from the game?
I know you were saying about from the website too.
I know.
Yeah.
No, the only other thing I want to say about the game was who was the guy that, there used to be a guy that worked and did stories for ESPN years back, and he would do them all the time, and he would go through every couple of weeks, he'd do one and run through a couple of weeks of games. And he always talked about where, coaches quit on their team all the time, whatever, and all the time it was like they got to this position and then they punted it back with this much time to go, game over.
Mm-hmm.
That's what went through my mind when we didn't go for it on the 4th and 1 to start the fourth quarter.
I mean, there's still so much about this game I want to talk about. We're going to push this first half a little bit longer before we get split it into the second half. That's a big one. I was upset that they punted from the Browns 38 when they were down 4 touchdowns in the second quarter. Yes, it was 4th and 9, but really, if you didn't convert it, what'd you have to lose unless you get sacked for 15 yards or something like that?
I mean, we were giving up to the 35 on kickoffs. What's the difference of 3 yards?
Yeah, and so I was just going to bring up the whole what happened on that drive anyway. They actually forced a punt then on a 3 and out on that one. So that's one good thing. But, if you still force a 3 and out anyway. But what bothered me was you end the third quarter, a third quarter in which the defense gave up 2 first downs on the first drive and then nothing for the rest of that drive. And nothing for the next 2 drives. And the Steelers score points and they get back into it. And they're within, was it 12? Was it 12 points? 12. I want to say 11, but yeah, it was 12 points. And they're at the 46-yard line. You're almost to midfield and 4th and 1. Okay. Coach Tomlin's, we're going to do another one. Okay. If you can't get 1 yard, you don't deserve to win.
Except in the
playoffs. Except in the playoffs. Because didn't even say, let's go for the 1 yard. I mean, 1 yard. And he's like, well, the defense had been stopping him and I wanted to put him in a good position. If the defense had been stopping him, then show them that you're willing to do anything it takes on offense to try to come back and not settle. You showed you were willing to settle. Now, I had another problem with that. First of all, no, you don't punt there. And my tweet that I put out there, I said, we can argue whether or not you punt there all off season. But the other thing that's going to get lost in this.
Oh, no, it wasn't lost in it. I thought it was so stupid as well.
Is if you're going to go out and try to get the other team to jump off sides and you're going to take a delay of game penalty, why in the world are you doing it with your friggin' punt team? As soon as he lined up and started moving around, the Browns weren't going to jump.
At midfield, they're not going for a block.
They're going return
or anything like that. They're not going to jump.
Yeah, they weren't going to jump. That was done. As soon as they started shifting around, I'm like, they're going to try to draw them off sides with the punt team. I'm like, if you're going to take the penalty, well, first of all, I was going to be mad if they took a timeout because they were going to need their timeouts. And if you're going to take the penalty, get your offense out there and try to get them to jump off sides because they probably think you are going to go for it because you want to know why. I'll be honest with you. How many out of 31 other NFL head coaches, how many of them do you think would have gone for it in that situation rather than punt? I don't think it's 31, but I bet you it's at least 25.
I believe it or not, I don't think it is.
Really? At midfield, down 11 points when your offense is rolling and everything, and you've been down a ton and you've got to fight your way back into the game. You hadn't punted the entire half. You hadn't been stopped on third down the entire half, except for the one right before it. They're going to go for it.
Including our coach, 9 others would have punted.
You think 9 others?
Yep.
Okay. So you put the number at 22 go for it and 10 punts, or 23 go for it and 9 punt. Well, something like that. Yeah, I got you.
22 go. But 22 go for it, 10 punt.
Now, you know what you did? This is what you don't think of. Stop being selfish and thinking about yourself. What you gave was the Browns hope that they stop the momentum because they got to stop. And you didn't want to give them a bigger stop. Well, guess what? You would have crushed them if you would have said you still can't stop us. That could have been a devastating play.
If the Steelers make that 4th down and go on to score, I think chances go to probably 90% Steelers win.
Yeah, I think they would. Yeah, I think that was a chance they could have come back and won that game. But you know what you did? You gave the Browns defense a win, which gave the Browns offense like, we need to come through for our defense to just stop, And now, if you don't get it, and you're like,
if you score the touchdown there and get it inside a touchdown score, everybody, because all the fans, the coaches, the players start thinking, "Oh no, here we go again.
Yeah.
Here are the Browns."
Yeah, exactly. You could have let them be the Browns as the Browns. You had a chance. Yep. You had your Browns as the Browns moment, and you passed on it.
Yep.
And you passed on it. You didn't take it. And by doing that, you're like, oh, well, maybe, we're trying to do that. Not going for it on fourth down, I'm sorry. Chances are you don't win that game. And you're like, but if we go for it on fourth down and don't get it, then we almost certainly don't win the game. You're probably not going to anyway. Take the shot when you're down that much. I mean, that moment right there told me that it was
going for it right there was not going to lose us the game. Giving up 28 points quickly in the first quarter was going to lose us the game. Yeah. But going for it, making it, and scoring on that drive could have won us the game.
Exactly. They didn't play to win. They were playing not to lose.
Yeah.
In that decision, when you, after being down 28 points and you still make a decision in the game later on of not to lose, that's why you did. You made the decision to not go for the win, and instead you tried to not lose, and instead that's exactly what you did. Before we close up this half, we got to throw out another $2 from Steel Dog 88. He said, how sad will it be if it's a Browns-Ravens AFC Championship game? You know what? At this point, I'm not even thinking about the other stuff that's going on. I'm still thinking about this team. I want to look at the things that happened in 2020 to look forward to 2021, and that's what we're going to do in the second half of this show.
I will say this: the only thing I would celebrate about there is that the Chiefs wouldn't be in the AFC.
Yeah, that would. Yeah, it's funny because part of me is like, well, kind of. Then I guess I'm going to pull for Buffalo, but I tell you what, Bills Mafia, man, they can be really obnoxious. But I'll be honest with you, forget their fans. Their team is we'll talk about that later. What we need to do is we need to roll into part 2 here. So if you're listening to audio form, this was a long one, but come back for part 2. If you're with us here on Facebook or YouTube, hold on for a few seconds and we'll be right back. And we are back, Pittsburgh Steelers fans, with part 2 of the Scho Bro Show. I am Dave Schofield, co-editor behind thesteelcurtain.com. And with me, as always, is my big brother, Rich. Rich, did you get the stank out yet?
Oh, yeah, Kyle must have taken a shower. I smell Axe body wash going on or something.
It's that stank of that
teenage boy just took a shower thing going on.
Well,
oh, that's hilarious that I said that. I actually really did just catch a whiff of something like that.
Anyway, I spoke it into existence. Why couldn't we speak a Steelers victory into existence and a Steelers comeback? Bottom line is, if your team makes the postseason, if you're one of the 14 teams that make it to the postseason, 13 of them are going to end the season on a loss.
Yep.
It's how it is.
We're talking about 31 teams in the NFL go home without the championship every year.
Yeah.
One at the end of the season, 1 out of 32 gets to celebrate. And the problem is, I like it when that one is the Steelers.
Exactly. Everyone else gets to talk about next year when one team gets to enjoy this past year for a little bit longer. Now, were the Steelers going to go win the Super Bowl? If they'd have made that comeback, we'll never know what would have happened. But woulda, coulda, shoulda. But bottom line is, you don't want to. If you're going to lose in the postseason, you don't want to lose like that. That was the problem. It was a bad loss. But you know what?
The other thing I'll say is good about it is partway through the first quarter, I'm so numb to everything. I just watched the rest of the game and wrote my article.
Yeah.
I wasn't all wound up like I was. It wasn't, needing my heart medicine at the end of the game because, they were killing me.
Yeah.
It was over 5 minutes into the game.
Yeah. And you know what? And that one moment I was like, are you telling me they're gonna? I mean, if they'd have got within one score, and that was the thing, when they chose to punt the ball, that was your chance to get it to within one score. And when you're in a one-score game in the fourth quarter, unless the other team's in victory formation, so you're telling me there's a chance.
That's right.
But they didn't seize that opportunity. But the biggest thing with moving forward is there's a lot of good things to look at, and there's a lot of bad things to look at. There is a lot of uncertainty with this Pittsburgh Steelers team. I said it last year. Last year, for the Steelers to function and do the things they needed to do, it was the year of the restructure. They had all these players that had 2 years left on their deal, 2020 and 2021, and they basically decided every single one of them, not on a rookie deal, they decided to pay them everything this year as a signing bonus, other than the minimum, but basically the minimum for each player. And that pushed half of it to next year. Well, guess what? Now we're going into that year where they pushed half of it, and a salary cap that is projected to go down. How much they put a floor on it. It's not going to drop below, I think, roughly
170.
It's roughly 25 million less than what this past year's, but there's a lot of people that are projecting that it's not going to drop that low. That's a big thing and a big uncertainty there. So if 2020 was the year of the restructure, 2021 is going to be one of two things. It's either the year of the extension or it's the year of the dead cap hit.
It's time to pay the piper.
You know what I mean?
Seriously, somebody bring me my checkbook.
Yeah. So it's going to come due eventually. The only question is, I think it'll be a combination of both. There's going to be some players that you're going to say, you might carry a dead cap hit of $4 billion, but we'll save 4.5. And right now it's worth this. It's worth it to not have to pay that 4.5. Yep. The Steelers are going to have a number of those players. And unfortunately, they have a lot of guys that are not under contract right now, and they're probably going to lose most of them. I mean, we could go through the list, and honestly, I think that might be what we probably do next week. We'll probably go through the whole list and say, stay, go, and things like that. We don't have time to do that one on this show. We're still getting over this. So unless somebody else grabs that before we get a chance to, I'll have to make sure I try to claim that one. That's some stuff that we'll look at next week. We might even break it down into multiple weeks and look at different sides of the ball and things like that. So the problem is it's going to be really hard to pay people. I'll ask you this one. I loved the pick of Alex Highsmith this past year. Remember, he was a third-round pick, but you also got to remember, the Steelers didn't have a regular third-round pick. They lost that one. That was the comp pick that they had for, why am I suddenly, for Mr. Who was the third-round comp pick last year? It was for Mr. Butt Naked Get Robbed, right?
Yeah.
Yes, that was what the Highsmith pick was. So it wasn't even an early third-round pick or even a later it was the comp pick. It was over pick 100. And
so basically it's in the third round, but really it's a fourth-round pick.
Yeah, it's more like a beginning of the fourth-round pick if they kept it at 32 picks per team. So when you look at that, you have to say, okay, good pick. But the reason it was so smart was you had a year to figure out, is he someone that could be the replacement for Dupree, or are we going to have to draft that position high next year if we can't keep Dupree?
Yep.
What's the question now is, what do you think the Steelers do there?
He can replace Dupree.
I think he can too. And I don't think they can afford to spend that much money on Dupree of what he's going to bring.
Correct.
So, and you can't franchise him again because that's even more expensive than what he would be otherwise. Yes. I mean, and if they somehow could work out a deal with Dupree where that first year counts hardly anything towards the salary cap and they sign him, I'm not going to be upset. Trust me, I'm not. I just don't know. Even being a numbers guy, I don't know how they work those numbers, but I'm not saying that they can't. I'm just saying, oh man.
I'd say you'd be okay. Yeah. Do I love the Bud Dupree? Sure I do. But if you've got to make decisions, I think you've got a guy that is probably not quite on Bud Dupree's level now, but he's younger and can work into that. And I really think he can be the replacement. So, Mr. Highsmith, if you're listening to this, know that we think that Alex is ready to go. And I say that because, he's watched our show before.
Yeah. There's some breaking news tonight from Jerry Dulac that we just got the article out on the site. Okay. I don't know if people wanted to know that. In case you hadn't heard, the news was that the Steelers facility was closed yesterday because there was a player who tested positive for COVID-19. And there was possibly, lots of close contacts because once the Steelers were eliminated, they could go up to each other and hug and, and kind of reminisce and things like that because it wasn't going to affect next week if that's what they chose to do. We can get into the moral debate somewhere else other than here about whether that was smart to do or not. But Jerry Dulac reported on who the player was that tested positive. It was one Eric Ebron. So after being the close contact and having the 5 days and the no tests and the no symptoms, then he tests positive later on. So that's very interesting. We just wanted to get that out to people. Not that we're going to go into a big discussion about it, but that's which honestly, you know what that might do, unfortunately, for the rest of the NFL? That might change their policy on how long they keep out the close contacts for the rest of the postseason. They might have to consider changing that up, beyond this, if they have close contact people again, because obviously that wasn't long enough in order for them to get the positive back. So very interesting.
Well, if at my job, if you're a close contact, you know what that puts you out?
14.
14.
Yep. So, just very interesting, but, looking forward, the Steelers have a lot of decisions to make, and we could talk draft. And I know we had a draft super chat early on, and they were talking about center versus running back, tackle. Tackle's another go. I know you got, because you don't have Zach Banner under contract. Is he going to come back for another 1-year prove-it deal where you could have maybe him and
come back, Zach? Come on.
Yeah, I would like to see Zach
about both of you out there on either tackle spot. Come on back, Zach.
Because the thing is, it would be nice to be able to draft a tackle, not with their very first pick, and someone that they could take a year before you have to completely depend on, like they did with Dotson, who, in my opinion, should have been starting much sooner. I mean, I still don't. The Dotson
should have been starting last night.
And the thing, night before, technically. It still feels like last night.
What are you talking about? It really.
And then people got upset because Filer had a couple penalties early. Well, the hold on Filer, did you watch that? There was no hold there.
No, there was not.
He just turned his guy and drove him to the ground.
I know.
That was a bad call. And then the illegal man downfield penalty. One, that wasn't the offensive line's fault because that pass was supposed to be quick. And two, he wasn't the only guy.
Correct.
So
he and Pouncey were both downfield.
And they're like, oh, Filer was not bad in the game. But I still don't. And some people are like, what do you mean? No, if you look, he wasn't terrible in the game. It wasn't like, oh, he was so bad they should have played Dotson. But Dotson earned that. He earned the right to stay there. And they didn't give it to him. And that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Yep. It really did. So in my honest opinion, the Pittsburgh Steelers' best offensive lineman for the 2020 season, they chose to have stand on the sidelines in the postseason. So that kind of bothered me a little bit. So you can talk about Steelers draft needs. You can talk about center. You can talk about tackle. We'll do it. But some people are like, oh, first of all, it drives me nuts when people say, and people know how frustrated I got last offseason with, you got to go this in round 1. You've got to go this in round 2. No, they don't got to. They don't got to. Everyone was saying how they had to go running back in round as their first pick last year. And then Dobbins was there and the Steelers didn't take him. I'm sorry. As good as Dobbins has been for that purple team, I'm still happy that they have Chase.
Oh, yes.
So And I mean, and who's to say Dobbins would have been any better going behind this offensive line? And, you know, and right now people are saying the Steelers have to get Najee Harris. No, they don't.
No,
they don't. They don't.
Would I mind?
They can, but they don't have to do anything.
I wouldn't mind
Najee Harris. I love Najee Harris, but they don't have to do anything because your draft. I mean, you know what people were saying last January and February? The Steelers have to go tight end early. They have to go tight end with one of their first 2 picks.
Yep.
Did they draft a tight end?
Nope.
No, because they signed Eric Ebron.
Right.
So what is going on now and what is going on in April could be 2 very different things. Do the Steelers need a quarterback? There's going to be some big questions about that between now and April. And that has to do with one Benjamin Todd Roethlisberger and everything that they're going to have go down there. Okay. Do the Steelers need a cornerback? Do they have to let one of theirs go because of everything? That's going to depend because of cap stuff. That's going to depend between now and April. Okay. Yep. What about offensive line? They need offensive line. Exactly what positions along the offensive line is going to have a lot to do with what happens between now and April. Somebody like a Matt Filer who can play so many different spots. If you can bring him back, once again, you've got freedom. If you can't bring a guy like that back, then you've got very specific spots to fill.
Yep.
You know, so there's a lot of questions that the Steelers personnel decisions and free agent period. I don't see them being big players in free agents and you know, outside free agents, because bottom line is they need to try to keep as many of their own players that need kept. And they also are going to have to let go of some of their own players that need to be let go. So I'm not going to make all those decisions. I'm going to say what I think they might do, but it's very difficult to say. I mean, last year I thought, you know, I wasn't completely sure what they were going to do with Vance McDonald. This year, I don't see how they could continue to pay him what they owe him with what they were getting out of him, even though he was a decent blocking tight end. I just don't know if you can pay that much money for a blocking tight end. I don't know. The Detroit Lions are with Jesse James because they hardly ever throw in the ball. Although he did get a touchdown late in the year.
Jesse James caught that ball.
Yeah, because he really caught that one for Pittsburgh anyway. So there's a lot of things to do. Okay, like people are saying, are they going to release Hayden? Are they going to release McDonald? Are they going to release Vince Williams? Are they going to release? Well, you can't release everyone, and you can't re-sign everyone. They've got a lot of decisions, lots of decisions. And if we want to get into the drafts, my goodness, the draft is going to have to be something that's going to have to fill holes for what they lose. And we don't know what they're losing yet. So yes, it's now starting to be time to pay attention to the draft, but you can't really get into the specifics of what you can really expect until after that free agency period. You agree with that?
I do.
Yeah. So we've got a different Kyle Smith dropping $5 into the tip jar. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. He says, if the Steelers revamp the O-line and the drafted free agency, do you see what Connor can do behind a new line or move elsewhere? If Connor were cheap, James Conner, honestly, it's going to come down to, do I think the Steelers will offer him something? Yes. Do I think they will offer him much? No. There's going to be, maybe we could do a couple of these with just yes and no here real quick. A couple of these tough decisions where you say, do the Steelers even offer a contract at all? You know, do the Steelers offer James Conner a contract?
Yes.
Yes. Just not might not be very much. Juju Smith-Schuster?
Yes.
Yes. Bud Dupree?
No.
You don't think they even offer him anything? Because you think he'll... Okay. You know what?
I don't know. Because right now they'd have to... Ask me again next week.
Yeah. I could see a Bud Dupree situation like, hey, Bud, we don't have a lot to offer you. We really don't. You want to go test the market, see what you can find, and check back with us before you go, and we'll see if we can figure it out.
That's what
Please, we don't want to insult you with what we can do right now. because we know you're probably worth more than what we could offer you right now. But if you come back with a number that you're going to take somewhere else and want to throw it to us, at least, if you really want to stay,
we'll
they
say,
could try to do that.
We'll say this is what we can do, or we'll say, you know what, we can't come anywhere close to that.
Yeah.
Thanks for being a Steeler. Go get your money.
And that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But if you at least tell him that, to say, hey, if you want to say what you're going to take and you want to say, I would take that same amount here, and tell us what it is when you actually have that offered to you, we will look into it for you.
Yep.
So, yeah. So it's just these are, he's going to be expensive. So that's just one of those things. Do you think they bring back? I mean, there's a lot of guys with 1 year left on their contract that you got to know. I mean, the Steelers could have no tight ends when it's all said and done. Do they want to keep Ebron or not? Do they want to keep Vance McDonald or not? These are tons and tons and tons of questions. But you know who they are keeping? They're rookies that are under contract.
Well, yeah.
So a lot of people are saying, "Oh man, they got to pay TJ Watt this offseason." No, they don't. Because
we get the fifth year option because he was a first round pick.
And I tried to say this, like Ian Whetstone, friend of the show. He's been on our shows before. He's a cap guy for, I think it's Steel City Underground, if I remember correctly. We converse at times via the written word, not like I actually speak to him in person very much, but just with things. He was saying it last year that this is the year to pay TJ. I don't.
But let me ask
but
you
they
a question.
Could. Yeah.
Do we have the ability? See, this is what I don't know about how things work sometimes. That's why I'm asking. We have the ability to say, hey, he's going into that fifth year, give him an extension, let the base salary stay the same for this year coming up. Decide how much you're going to pay him for a year, how much further out, and then how much you're going to do salary cap, which gets spreads out over the contract.
Yeah.
Could they do that?
Yeah. The whole, because if you can get that first year really low, then this might be the time.
It's one where they'll get with TJ and his agent and say, look, we don't want to let this carry on past now, but because of our cap situation, we can't give you too much more right now. So what we want to do is keep your base salary instead of making you play out the fifth year and then do this.
Yeah,
we'll extend you now, but we need this fifth year in to stay the same base salary, and then we'll spread the cap over the next, however many years we
just
put
how
out.
They do it. You get that first year cheaper.
Yes,
is the way it works with these deals, unless you choose not to do it that way. But that's generally what you do. You get that first year.
Sorry, I feel better if we could. Look, I'll understand if we don't. I'd feel better if we could go ahead and get TJ under contract.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. You could get him under contract less next year than possibly what his fifth year option would be. That's what you have to look at.
Yeah.
If can you get that? Because basically his first year, other than the minimum, it's all his signing bonus.
Correct.
And and that's something you got to remember with numbers. I know we're running over a little bit. We'll wrap this up. We'll get into some of these number things. I might, I'll be covering them on Stat Geek some too.
Yep.
But people are like, oh, Ben Roethlisberger, he's not going to walk away from $41 million. He's not getting paid $41 million. He's got a cap hit of $41 million. He's already been paid $22.25 million of that. It's been paid. It's in his bank accounts or wherever else he spent it. The Steelers aren't having to write that check. That check was written years ago, but it's where they kicked the can down the road. $19 million is this year, 15 of which is a roster bonus in March. I got to go back and double check to make sure that I'm pretty sure that's his contract. 15 million roster bonus, 4 million base salary. Now, what could they do with that? Could he walk away from part of that bonus? I mean, he walks away from all of it if he decides not to play anymore. Yes. Right. Could he kind of not keep the Steelers on the hook for that bonus or whatever and say, let's do a 1 year extension and where I'm going to get paid this amount and blah, 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 and drop that $19 million significantly? Yes, they could. But the Steelers are going to have to decide: do you want all 19 million of that, or do you want part of that and still have BTR? Because you're going to have 22 and a quarter of it, no matter what. So it's 19 million he'd be paid for this season. If you're going to extend Ben a little bit, I think it's kind of what the Steelers decide what they do with Ben Roethlisberger is going to play in a little bit to what they do with TJ Watt. They might even need TJ Watt's next season to be the one that's low, depending on how they work things. I'm not sure. Okay. So that's kind of how it goes. So J.R. Bradford said something about this. This is right. He says that last $4 million isn't guaranteed. That's right. That's his base salary for the season. So he would get paid that over the 17 weeks of the regular season. The $15 million is guaranteed because they got to pay him the roster bonus if he's still on the roster. Sometime in March in relation to the beginning of the league year. So that's how it works. Once that hits, boom, that $15 million is paid. So they need to decide what they're doing. Prior to that. So that's some of the numbers involved with stuff. It's going to get tricky, but it's not impossible to work around. But I want to take the last few minutes of this show. Usually is when we come in and we give our score. You give your score, and we bring them up on the screen. Obviously, we don't have that to do anymore, which makes us really sad. We got to let you all know we're going to be coming every Tuesday. I mean, there might be a time where if like one or both of us is on vacation, that it won't be us or something like that. But you're going to be still getting a show every Tuesday night. You know, I don't know. I haven't asked Rich. He might quit on me, which well, it is what it is. People are like, that's okay. We'll get Kyle to replace you.
Yeah,
people would probably rather have Kyle than you and I anyway. I'm sad. I'm still trying to figure out the exact best way to say this. But part of what makes me sad is I think of different things in life, you know, whether like when you go away to camp and you get really close to everyone for a week and then you leave. And I mean, when we were younger, you know, you didn't have your cell phones, you didn't have email, you weren't email. You might send them actual letters through snail mail, you know, back there, but you met all these people and you had these great experiences at camp and you leave and you still might stay in contact, but you're never going to get back to that same experience. You could even go back to the camp the next year, but you know what? It's not going to be all the same people. You're going to have some of the same, some are the same and some are gone. And that's why I would leave camp and I would be sad because of, you know, knowing that the time that I had to spend with those specific people was over. That's how I feel about the 2020 Pittsburgh Steelers, especially covering the team like I do, to where I could name you every player on the roster and almost everybody on the practice squad, that I feel like I'm invested and know this team. I mean, I've written so many articles about every roster move, about where they came from, where they played in college, and this, that, and the other stuff. I mean, Michael Beck is invested in this team. He did an article about every single player in the 90-man roster. Going to there. And like my sister said, not the same girlfriends. Yeah, she always made fun of me for finding a girlfriend every time I went to camp. But anyway, I digress.
You digress.
I digress. So that's what makes me sad about this 2020 team. It's not going to be the same.
And it was fun. It really was. It was fun. You know, we started up back in September thinking, okay, can we get 6 games in? Okay, can we get 8 games in? Can we, you know, because I mean, there were people that said we wouldn't even get 4 weeks in and the league would be shut down.
Yeah.
The league's getting ready to go into the
playoffs and haven't missed a game.
Yep. So, you know, there it is. And unfortunately for us as Steeler fans, we've made it all the way through and are at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we made it. And it was
I'm sad. There was no Mike Tomlin press conference today. They pushed it to tomorrow. That's the last time we're going to hear from Mike Tomlin until the draft. I'm so used to Tuesdays at noon listening to the press conference and the next day writing my players mentioned by Mike Tomlin article. I am so used to looking at crunching the numbers or analyzing the win or loss by the numbers. I'm so used to doing an injury report 3 times a week projecting the inactives, doing the article of the inactives, doing articles about roster moves. It's gone.
Maybe we'll just get him on the show.
What's that?
We'll just get him come on the show.
Yeah. 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 Hey, coach, we'll ask you a couple questions. But there's just so much about this, and it's not going to be the same. And the thing is not only, even if it was exactly the same, we got to wait till August to get it again. I mean, do you know how long it was last year from January to August? It was like 6 years, it felt like.
Yeah.
You know? So I'm not looking forward to that. There's stuff to talk about in the offseason. We are going to continue to bring you great content at BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, your one-stop shop for all things Pittsburgh Steelers. We're going to continue to bring you all these podcasts. Obviously, we can't bring you the Injury Report podcasts or the Mike Tomlin press conference podcasts. Those, we're not going to have those anymore because those aren't going to be happening. But we're going to have our regular audio shows, our regular YouTube shows. You're still going to get to check out the handsome blokes from down under on Saturdays, or
who have been in the live chat
from the future. Yeah, who are in the live chat there. You're still going to have that from us.
Good day, mates.
There you go. But it's just, I don't like this time of year. You know, my kids are always like, Dad, are you sad that the Steelers lost? They ask me this every year. I'm like, are you sad? I'm like, Mark's naming Native Australian Bird Podcast.
Come on, say your accent.
Mark's naming day. No, I can't do it right now. My throat's actually a little bit sore. Anyway, I got to get back on track to what I'm saying.
I know. Sorry, I couldn't help.
I know you couldn't help it. That it's a big change. This was a great season. There was a lot of problems with this season. The collapse over the last 6 games royally sucked. No fans in the stands for almost all the games. And when they did have a few fans, it was only a few thousand. And me actually not being in my seats at Heinz Field royally sucked. But we got to watch football. We got to watch 17 Steelers games this past season, and we got to watch them win 12 of them, which when I picked the Steelers to go 12-4, I knew it was ambitious. And by gum, they were 12-4 and should have had a better record. So I'm frustrated that the Steelers season is over and that they lost the way they did and what happened. I'm just more disappointed that it's the end of the road for this. And the beginning of the road is so far off. How do you feel about that, bro?
It is, but it'll be fun kind of picking through as things start to happen and next year's roster starts to take shape.
Yeah.
And trust me, I think we're going to have plenty to talk about during that time. It's just that eventually we're going to get to the point. Typically, well, here's the hope. You know, the other thing was I'm sad because
our sister, who once again will say it, happy birthday. She said she's
I'm
sad.
starting to wonder if she's been drinking here on her birthday with some of her recent comments.
She's sad because the Pirates stink.
Maybe she was the one down in Iron Cities like you who's doing the game the other night.
I actually said to my wife, I'm like, I'm not a drinker. And I'm like, we didn't have anything to drink in the house because if we did, I probably would have been pounding it Sunday night. Yeah. So now
here's what I hope for going forward. Last summer was particularly tough because there was no OTAs, no mini camp, no training camp to speak of. Yeah, well, by the time it got rolling, and it wasn't a regular training camp.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, it got long. I'm hoping it doesn't feel quite as long this year.
Yeah. I mean, there's going to be stuff to cover. You know, we're going to have new stuff to talk about next week, and we're going to have it every week, pretty much. There's always something going on. The NFL never sleeps. It really doesn't. We'll have other things to talk about. I want to even talking about the games from this coming weekend because we're focused on the Steelers right now. That's we'll probably mention those games some next week, but this is how we're feeling right now. This is how I'm feeling right now. And I'm like, I'm sad that that journey is over. But you know what? We'll be back next Tuesday to really help that new journey beginning. that, hey, it's the 2021 Steelers. Let's see what we got going. Let's see how they work this out. I'm very curious to see how they're going to make these moves. I think they're in a bad spot, but I think they can manage it. It's just they have to make the decisions of how they're going to manage it.
It's going to be fun and interesting to see what decisions are made based on what we have to do to manage our cap and what we then can do with what we do after we manage that cap.
Yeah. So my end of season mourning should be over very, very soon, and we're going to come back and crush this. I am in mourning for the 2020 Steelers. I know they're not going to be the same team anymore, and there's going to be guys that will never put on that black and gold again, and that makes me sad. But you know what? There's going to be other new players that put on that black and gold next year, and I'm excited about that too. So in the offseason, you're going to see tonight we went extra long talking about wrapping up the season. We're not going to be going as long in the future. I'll tell you that right now. And we're going to be able to do more interaction and questions from the live chat and things like that as these shows roll on. So those are some things that has me excited as well. Make sure that you continue to tune in to all the podcasts. We'll be still having YouTube shows once a day, every day of the week. That's still our schedule right now. Sunday's going to look a little different. I think we might be getting back to some Brian Anthony Davis shows that it might even be that he's having guests on with the way he's going to be doing a show. He's still working that out. You'll still have the morning audio only content that we produce. And of course, you'll still have Behind the Steel Curtain as your one-stop shop for all things Pittsburgh Steelers. Rich, anything you want to say to wrap these things up?
Yes. Okay. Sad that 2020 is done and over, but 2021 Steelers, can't wait.
See you next week.